The Martian by Andy Weir, 50 Shades of Grey by E.L. James, The Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield, Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. All these works of literature are now quite well known, some on the border of being cultural phenomena. Despite their disparate subject matter, all four of these works intersect at a meaningful point. They were all initially self-published. These, along with a plethora of other success stories, serve as inspiration for a multitude of aspiring authors who have chosen to self-publish their work. Our podcast, Homespun Script, is dedicated to telling their stories, talking with them about their work, and listening to their experiences as self-published authors. The goal is simple: provide indie and self-published authors with a platform to promote themselves and their work. While providing this space hopefully does help, we encourage all our listeners to further support these authors by writing positive and engaging reviews of their work on a platform we all know of but will remain nameless. Doing so is a simple, easy, and direct way of supporting them. And now, on to our guest. Hello, and welcome to the podcast Homespun Script. My guest today is Charles House, author of the science fiction novel Archblade, Legend of the Defiler. Published in 2023, Archblade initiates the story of the crew of the exploratory spaceship Forerunner. Drawn in and trapped on an unfamiliar planet by an inexplicable gravitational field, the crew of the Forerunner find themselves caught in the middle of a complicated political tapestry amongst a hauntingly familiar local population. As they navigate this unfamiliar territory, the crew discover not only more about themselves as individuals, but also about their past and their scientific understanding of the world. So, Charles, you self-published Archblade in 2023, which I think I can safely describe as a rather adept blend of science fiction and fantasy. Due to the number of seemingly diverse ideas you fluidly weave together here, it strikes me as a project that was long in the making. Can you tell us maybe a bit about yourself and how the book came to be?
Well, I've loved reading ever since I was a kid, and when I was fifth grade, they had writing projects, and I loved reading, and I wanted to craft my own stories, so I jumped right into that. And I was drawn in by fantasy, science fiction, horror, all those elements. And my fifth grade teacher, on probably the best of my projects, actually said that someday we will see books of his on shelves, and that just inspired me. And
that's
that
great inspiration. Yeah.
I wanted to write from that point on. Unfortunately, I spent years trying to come up with something that worked, and at the very beginning it was basic, it wasn't interesting, it wasn't terribly unique. But over the years, I added things, changed things, and after about 25 years, I finally found something that, made it work.
Okay, and the result of this was Archblade, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great.
One interesting thing is, about 3 years ago, I was talking to my wife about writing, because she was interested in writing a book, and she was feeling really insecure about trying to come up with something. And so I told her about my idea. And I just randomly off the cuff said, hey, let's make it a science fiction fantasy blend. And that made it all snap into place. It worked, and it felt good in my brain, and I started writing it, and, it took off. It actually became a story.
Oh, okay. So did you write it kind of like a seat of the pants sort of thing, or did you outline the whole plot beforehand?
I had an outline, a very rough outline, but a lot of things developed as I wrote. And I mean, I would definitely consider myself more of a plotter, because there's, plotters versus pantsers, but some things come to mind as I write, but I definitely think I plot more than anything.
Yeah, I hear you there. Everything I do is centered around organization and planning things out. But so, yeah, you mentioned that you got interested in science fiction, fantasy, and horror in fifth grade. That's quite a while ago. And these ideas have been percolating for 25 years. Can you remember the first thing you wrote that got your teacher's attention?
Oh my gosh. Um, I wrote this god awful horror story for a Halloween project about this box of evil little fidgets, little things that people would say, "Oh, that looks yummy," and I'll try to eat it, and they turn into a monster. And this guy eats one, and he turns into what was a blatant ripoff of Crash Man from Mega Man 2.
Mhm.
And it was terrible, honestly. I mean, I had all these silly like cliche ideas, and I mean, I was proud of it at the time, but bless my teacher's heart, he was like, you know what? You can do better. I bet if you take the time to really put your heart into it, you can do better. And then um, I wrote two other stories that, again, were blatant ripoffs of other things I've seen, but they were much better.
Yeah, it's hard, I think, at that age, especially to not have things that at least borrow substantially from what you've already read. But also, when you say like crazy ideas here and crazy ideas there, I would think the imagination of a fifth grader might go off in kind of really interesting directions every so often. Um,
Interesting is definitely the word for it.
okay. So yeah, getting back to Archblade, it seems that so have many of these ideas that are present in the book, have they been percolating all this time,
Uh,
or was it more like the energy that was percolating and it just all of a sudden burst out for you?
well, the original concept of the male main character and the main antagonist, those were always present.
Mhm.
And um, I had this weird interest in necromancy and undead and zombies and monsters like that from a young age. So that was always a big thing too. So it was always like the hero fighting an army of the undead. That's how everything started. And of course, I was a young boy and I was interested in girls. So there's the whole rescuing the damsel and she falls in love with them too.
Mhm.
That was the basic thing that's always been a part of it.
Okay,
And then other elements just got added as time went on.
cool. Yeah, are you a Dungeons and Dragons guy or not?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, I think I've lost a few friends recently to the digital heroin that is Baldur's Gate 3.
Oh, I love that game. One of my when you were talking about the actors about what you want to do later, one of which is voice actor from Baldur's Gate 3.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, let's leave that because I didn't choose any of the voice actors from Baldur's Gate 3, but I think a couple of them would fit fairly well into your novel.
Oh, they're so good.
Yeah, they really are. But anyway, let's get maybe to the plot of the book a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah. So Archblade, at least in the title, sounds very much like an action-oriented science fiction fantasy novel. As I read it, though, I realized it's much, much more than that because there are all kinds of ethical and philosophical obstacles that are encountered by the crew of the Forerunner that might be even more complicated and problematic than the military and logistical issues they face. Since there are quite a few of these, maybe you could talk about one or two of them and we can go from there.
Oh, absolutely. I think one thing that was really big to me was about a child worrying about inheriting the sins of their parents
Oh.
and worrying about becoming them. That's something that's always resonated with me because I'm not going to go into too much detail, but let's just say my biological father wasn't the greatest guy in the world, and I look just like him, and I spent years trying to have a good relationship with him. And after I saw how he wasn't such a great person, I became terrified of becoming that person. So that theme that's in my book about, Lark worrying about, his heritage and the kind of person he's going to become, that's very much personal to me.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
yeah.
I can
Uh,
definitely see a mirror there.
yeah. Another one, and honestly, this one I just kind of stumbled upon. The part where in the flashback when they're talking about the character Lissa, how she was impregnated against her will, and she was resolute in saying, "I'm keeping this baby. I don't care if like everybody in the kingdom is telling me I should get rid of it. This is mine. I will keep it."
Hmm.
And it's one of those things where I didn't mean to have that kind of thing, but at the same time, with the way the story unfolded, I realized that was going to be unavoidable. So,
Hmm.
I wanted to make it clear that I'm not trying to invite any kind of debate about, pro-choice or pro-life, but it's, she had her child, she was keeping it, and that was it.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't really see that as bringing up the issue of pro-life or pro-choice. I saw it mainly as a reflection of the issue that you just mentioned, which is whether we inherit the sins or inherit maybe the disposition of our parents in some way. And I saw Lark struggling with this later in the book when he says something like, "Your abilities don't define you, your choices do."
Yeah. Um, Actually, I had a couple of beta readers point out the whole pro-choice thing more than
Oh,
anything.
okay.
So I kind of changed that scene to try to reflect that better. But yeah, I mean, at first I didn't see it as much either, but I had people point it out, and they're like, okay, yeah, you have a point. So,
Yeah, I suppose
um,
you can find it in there, but yeah, it didn't even occur to me when I read it.
that's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a great thing about these books. I mean, you look at it differently. Different people find different issues. That's why I love this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a mark of good literature when it sparks a different discussion or different thought pattern in different readers
Oh yeah,
in perfectly legitimate ways.
I agree entirely. Um, let's see. I could see another good example. Oh, later on when Angel is really pressuring the Treekin to join a battle that they very much didn't want to be a part of.
Mm,
It's that ethical conundrum. It's like, this is in your best interest, but at the same time, pressuring and forcing. That was really tricky for me, trying to, sculpt that scene in a way that made it seem like, neither side is being particularly unreasonable. Because,
right.
yeah, I could see it's easy for someone to take side in an issue like that. So,
Hmm.
hopefully I did it right. But I'm pretty happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, that scene was really good. I actually have a note in here about it, but we see almost a personality change in Angel at that point because at one point at the beginning of the story she's kind of reserved and she's this very intelligent scientist, and then all of a sudden there's this ethical issue she confronts and she says to herself, "I know this is the right thing to do," and it's like her personality changes all of a sudden.
Yeah. Yeah, I put a lot of work into her character growth through the story.
Mm. Yeah, that was some well crafted dialogue there. It moved really well, I thought.
Thank you. Also, tell my wife you said that actually, because I mean, she helps so much with that character for me.
Yeah, there's a long history of male science fiction authors writing female characters very poorly, and all we have to do is look at Robert Heinlein for that. Is his female characters are abysmal. Well, the way he writes them is abysmal. I'll
Yeah,
say
no,
that.
no, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, when
Yeah,
I was first writing and I was looking into broader spaces about tips, fellow authors, and whatnot, one of the first things I saw is men writing women and how it's been done terribly in the past.
yeah.
So I resolved to not be one of those.
Yeah, well, we have an uphill battle there, I think. But I thought you wrote Angel very well. She was a very strong character, and
Thank you.
yeah. Okay, let's talk about this neutrality directive.
Ah,
I have it capitalized here, and I think you mentioned it once or twice, but it wasn't capitalized in the book, so I might be imposing a name for it.
I didn't give it a name. It was
Okay,
just, this is our law. We don't interfere.
okay,
And um, yeah, I mean, it's different than what you may see in other science fiction mediums, because usually it's about not interfering with lesser developed cultures, which obviously doesn't apply here.
mhm.
But for them, it's more about just political and military. And yeah, that was fun because I had I had to come up with, like, I didn't want them to join the fight at the start. I wanted to create some tension and a bit of drama with the subject. But at the same time, there's this no-brainer thing. It's like any reasonable person may think, obviously you should fight. It's a terrible idea if you don't. So building up to them making that decision was something I really had to carefully do.
Yeah, I saw that as well because it took a lot for the crew of the Forerunner to sort of officially get involved in the whole military situation there. It took actually a couple skirmishes that they were involved in, and I think it even
some of their crew members were kidnapped at one point, and it was only after that.
Yeah, that was
Did
the
they-
tipping point.
Okay,
that
that was
was
the
when
tipping
they
point.
realized, okay, they're not going to leave us alone. We don't have they're kind of pushing it so we don't have a choice.
Mhm. Yeah. And some would even say that they could have justified being involved from the very beginning because they were forcefully dragged to the planet by the gravitational field, which I assume was from the Conclave, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, I think they may have been justified right off the bat, but yeah, they were very careful in the way they rationalized the whole thing.
Well, one thing, I mean, I agree with you, honestly. I mean, if I was
Sure.
like an objective reader reading this, I would have been like, yeah, why didn't they just join from the start? But
Mhm.
I think one important lens is that there's a lot of hints about their own conflict back home and
Yeah.
how they're trying to get support in one way or the other. So they're walking that fine line between we want help for our own problems, but at the same time, we have to deal with this and, the clash of dealing with both of those issues.
Hmm. Yeah, and they kind of realize well, I don't want to give too much up, but it happens you realize this fairly quickly. So I don't think I'm giving away a spoiler here, but
Yeah.
they realize very quickly that in order to get the new technology they're looking for to aid in their conflict back home, they're going to have to get involved in the conflict on this planet. And they can't come in, grab what they need, and run out like the whole planet's a burning house.
Exactly.
You brought up a point earlier. I want to go back to it. How and when I saw the rationalizations happening, obviously everyone's going to think this. We're going to think Prime Directive from Star Trek.
Oh,
And
yeah, definitely.
And I like how you distinguish what I'm calling the neutrality directive from the Prime Directive. And you said that the Prime Directive indicates that we shouldn't, or explorers shouldn't, interfere with the natural evolutionary development or technological development in order to give one side of a political conflict an advantage over the other. And yeah, you're right. This was very different because in terms of technology, their technology is completely different, and the way they do things is different. The way they think is different. Let's maybe segue into that a little bit. There's some of what is generally termed hard science fiction in your novel. And I'm referring specifically to the intersection of magic and technology, which runs throughout the plot. Can you maybe describe your approach and take on this theme?
Well, I've watched science fiction ever since I was a kid. Like my in my house, we watched Star Trek. It was the altar in which we watched television. So having accurate scientific, information and references was a big deal for me because to me that aids immersion and enjoyment when you think to yourself, this could actually happen. So I really wanted to incorporate that in my writing to try to give that same sense. I found like in some science fiction that, if you have too many scientific concepts that are supposed to be taken on faith without any real explanation,
Mm.
it can break the immersion. Like, I mean, like for example, one of my favorite shows is Stargate SG-1.
Mm.
You're probably familiar with it to some
Yep.
extent. But one thing that always bugged the crap out of me of that show is everybody spoke English and they never explained that. And it just drives me nuts. I mean, I'll still watch the show. I like it a lot.
Yeah.
But I just, my brain can't get past that.
Yeah, and even one of the more interesting things that's been done in science fiction, and this is even in the early 20th century, there are a few short stories, but encountering an alien species that thinks so differently that using the same language just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because, and I guess the most recent one would be the movie Arrival was patterned after it.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, it's a short story. I can't remember the author's name. It's going to drive me crazy now, but it's a very good short story. But the language is so different that it conveys literally a different thought pattern. And
that's interesting. I like that a lot.
But I'm not going to give any spoilers here. You have a perfectly good explanation for why it all works here. But yeah, let's go back to this intersection of magic and technology. That was pretty cool because you have the people on the planet using what's on the local people on the planet using what we would call magic and using gestures to make things happen, whereas the crew of the Forerunner uses definitely what we would call technology.
Yeah, absolutely. I I really wanted things to be simple and absorbable by the reader. Like one big approach I had with magic is it was just a matter of channeling elemental forces to do things. You know, it's not a matter of having a different set of spells that can make things levitate or change something into something else. I want it to be, simple. I mean, obviously that concept is broken a little bit with, essence and entropy magic doing more expanded things, but that simple approach, makes the intersection of magic and technology that much easier. And I think it all came off pretty well.
Yeah, it did. And what really interested me about it is that they're dealing with kind of the same physical reality. And the laws of physics don't really change when they land on the planet. It's just that they're being accessed in a different way by the crew of the Forerunner and the local population.
Yeah. Yeah. I went to extreme lengths to try to, make things as believable as possible. I had two amazing references for this book. I have a brother who has a degree in microbiology, who is probably the smartest person I know, and he's a font of scientific information. So whenever I had anything I was doubting about a concept, I would talk to my brother and say, hey, is this feasible? Is this believable? And a lot of times the answer was yes, so that helped. And then anything involving anatomy or medical information, wounds, medical care, my wife is a nurse, so she was invaluable for that. She helped a lot of scenes that involved, medical stuff and anatomy.
Did it involve the people getting cut up and all the gore and the violence that happened? Yeah, because that was pretty detailed as well and very convincing and had a pretty big impact on me.
She was really great about that.
Cool. So yeah, it reminds me of I think when we were discussing this before a little bit, that phrase of Arthur C. Clarke, where he says something along the lines of,
yeah, about sufficiently advanced technology being indistinguishable from magic.
Sounds good. But I know what you mean about, magic just being science that we don't understand yet.
Yeah. And I'm sure Arthur C. Clarke wasn't the first one to think that way, but his articulation of it certainly got popularized.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about a few of the main characters without, of course, spoiling any of the plot. Let's start with the operation and then move to the anesthetic. There are two villains, both of whom are quite different from one another. Why did you choose to have two villains and why so different?
Well, they represent what I consider to be the two best types of villains. I mean, on one hand, you've got the evil, sadistic, no empathy, no remorse, no chance at redemption. It's the kind of evil villain that's not terribly complicated, but at the same time, they do such terrible things. You love to hate them, and you get so much satisfaction from seeing them fall. My golden example of a villain like that would be Kefka from Final Fantasy VI. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar, but there's some of your listeners maybe, but he is the perfect epitome of the irredeemable evil villain. And on the other side is the methodical, complicated, wounded, the kind that believes what they're doing is right, the kind of thing that the reader might actually sympathize with them a little bit. And then a good example of that is Loki from the MCU.
Okay.
I really liked having both of them because I felt that they complemented each other and giving the reader a split perspective on the kind of threats that the main cast faces. I mean, the complex villain is the final encounter of the book, but the sadist, the one that's, kind of crazy, he's often the clear and present threat that's more scary.
Yeah. And this is Adura.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. I never detected anything like a moral conscience or anything like empathy from him. It was all very mechanical and actually taking joy in the suffering of others, or
Yeah.
if you even call that joy.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, when the brain is that twisted, it's hard to really say.
I was hoping he would die. So yeah, but I agree. Darkos is a lot more complicated, even though he's Adura's boss. You could maybe talk about that a little bit.
Well, he, God, I'm trying to do this without going into spoiler territory because the problem with
Mm.
Darkos is I'm planning a prequel book
Oh, okay.
that talks about him and everything that led to his fall. And I mean, when I wrote him as a character, one thing that was really nice is my wife said, "I love this character. I want to know more about him. Maybe we should try to write more of a story about him." And then, of course, I go online and I find out that people love complicated villains. They love sympathetic villains.
Hmm.
And that was great because, I mean, I loved him as a character too. But as far as the kind of person he is, I mean, he has a unique, organized mind. He has a lot of, negativity. He's got a lot of anger and, hatred. But at the same time, it's kind of like this cool, planned out kind of thing. And
Hmm.
I might be doing a terrible job describing it, but like I said, I'm trying to avoid spoilers. So
Right. Yeah. And if I'm a little bit on the borderline of a spoiler here, just let me know and I'll stop talking. But I got a big foreshadow of the complexity of that character and well, we all know this is going to happen. Darkos gets in a big fight with Lark. That there's no secret there. But at one point he says, "I am a necessary evil."
yeah,
And I thought, okay, there's something a lot more going on with this guy. He's not just some evil D&D necromancer who thinks, hey, death is cool. I'm going to raise the dead and
yeah,
get more power. But there's more to this guy. And the fact that you said, I have a prequel plan that goes into Darkos makes a lot of sense right now.
yeah. I'm looking forward to writing that.
Hmm. Awesome. So I also got the intention that, do you think Darkos is kind of beyond redemption or not?
You see that? You see that's a hard one to answer. I've
Okay,
got
don't answer it if it's going to give away spoilers, but I think that's open to interpretation even as the
it's
book progresses.
it's one of those things where if you're in my opinion, I mean this is more about the topic of morality, but my
Mm,
opinion is that if your intentions start out as good, and if you're willing to take a moment to say I was wrong, then there's always a chance of redemption. If you're
mhm,
willing to make that change and to admit fault,
mhm.
I think there's always a chance of redemption.
It's a tough one because I kind of see, or at least I'm speculating on Darko's past, that he's always trying to do the right thing, or at one point he was trying to do the right thing, and then he just got forced into this cycle or this everything snowballed and the means that he was using to try and accomplish this goal, which what may have been a noble goal, just spun way out of control. And so he's almost a victim of circumstance in a strange way. And maybe Lark is trying to avoid being that same sort of victim of circumstance that Darko succumbed to,
Oh yeah,
or maybe
yeah,
didn't even have a choice to succumb to.
yeah. Because that goes back to what you said about choice.
Hmm.
It's about making choice about who you are and not letting everything else make that choice for you.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm so delighted that you inferred all this from Darkos's character because
Oh, he was my
he's
favorite character. Yeah.
he's so important to this book, and it's going to be, and his importance is going to branch out into other books.
Awesome.
And you know, with this being my first book, I can't help but have a lot of self doubt about me doing things right. But you inferring all this from this character, I'm going, yes, I did it. This is good, awesome.
Yeah, I just want more. I want more Darkos, man. Yeah, so let's see. Let's revisit this phrase that Lark uses a lot. Your abilities don't define who you are. Your choices do. We can almost read that as your lineage doesn't define who you are. Your choices do, or your background doesn't define who you are. Your choices do.
Yeah. I mean,
And
it's,
there's a
no, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, there's a lot contained in there.
Well, yeah, very much so. I mean, it's supposed to be aimed to put his mind at rest because it's, I mean, Angel says that to him to start with, and it's supposed to help him see that he's more than the circumstance of his birth,
Mm-hmm.
and he's more than what his father planned for him. He's more than, the way he was raised, and that the choices he makes. And this is kind of dumb because I'm trying to avoid
Mm-hmm.
being a carbon copy of that quote from the Pokemon movie.
Oh,
You know what I'm talking about?
I don't actually.
There,
I'll
it's this
probably recognize
iconic
it.
line. There's this iconic line at the end where Mewtwo goes, "I see now that circumstances of one birth are irrelevant, but what you do with the choice of life is what matters." So
Oh, okay.
it's the same spirit for sure, but I was trying to like make it more. It's like it's not just about birth; it's also about the circumstances of your life
Mhm.
afterwards. That
Oh
matter.
yeah, and I think that's the point that Lark embodies that in a lot of ways. Why don't we move on to the anesthetic then? Your two
Hmm.
protagonists. Let's start with Angel. Maybe describe her as best you can without giving anything away, and say a bit on how you approached her experience of anxiety in like such a relatable way. Which I, as an aside, I thought you did that quite well.
Thank you. Well, to be blatantly honest, Angel's complexity and the way her anxiety portrayed is 100% because of my wife. I mean, I shamelessly I based Angel on her in a lot of ways. I mean, my
Mhm.
wife is one of the smartest people I know. She loves books. She has a very analytical, scientific mind, but she's had problems with anxiety her whole life. So, whenever there was a part of the book where Angel's anxiety would really crop up and get in the way or maybe even cripple her, I would always run it by my wife, say, "Here, help me describe this in a way
Oh,
that somebody with these problems would understand." Because, I mean, I know anxiety is such a common problem in our society today
yeah,
for a myriad of reasons, even if it's
sure.
not pathological, circumstantial is definitely a thing.
Mhm.
So, I want people to read this and go, I've been there. I know what that's like. And I think my wife, she did such a good job helping me with that.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, not cool that your wife has anxiety, but cool that everything worked that way to make the character of Angel seem a lot more human and
Yeah.
not cookie cutter at all. Yeah, I thought she was done very well. And as I said before, I love the scene where her whole personality almost changes in
Oh
the
yeah.
diplomatic relations with the Treekin. Like, whoa, where'd that come from?
Yeah, that was a real like pinnacle of her growth as a character.
Yeah, I hope we see more of her too. So let's move on to Lark. The character Lark's a different face of a multifaceted die of human personality. And I'll admit, when he entered the picture, he struck me as kind of dangerously close to a Mary Sue type. But as you developed him, it became very evident that he is not a Mary Sue. Can you maybe talk a bit about your thought process in this character development?
Well, I'll be honest. I mean, when I was first imagining the story as a teenager, he was absolutely that kind of character. He was a dashing hero with no flaws who always kept his cool and always won the day single handedly. But as I expanded my worldview and I read more books and you know, I I saw the value in having flawed characters that were more real and more human. He evolved as a character too. I mean, my very first draft of this book actually still had many of those problems. I think the most important change is when I decided to make Angel a second protagonist rather than just a supporting character,
Mhm.
giving her more time in the story and being the guiding force behind many of the important events. That allowed Lark to have more vulnerabilities and gave her more of a chance to shine herself. So, doing so with that duality between the two characters, it allowed, more flaws and more ways for them to complement each other.
Mhm. Yeah, I saw Lark. He's this amazing warrior. And as a warrior and as a fighter, he doesn't have a whole lot in terms of flaws. But when it comes to social interactions. He's really not that good. He's kind of immature.
Yeah.
And yeah, that comes out a little bit later. So when he visits like the stone giants and the ravagers and the treekin, everyone respects him as a warrior. But when diplomatic relationships come in, he kind of backs off and doesn't really know what to do.
There's a couple of reasons that. I mean, one is that, he's definitely inept. He's very much the mindset, people tell me to kill things, and that's what I'm good at, so I focus on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But also, he has to deal with a legacy that haunts him about how they talk about the races unifying to fight the conclave, and that legacy kind of fell on his shoulders, and it's something he dreams of, but the pressure and everything else going on, he kind of cracks under it.
Yeah, when you said that, this whole idea of Lark being scared that he's just going to fall into this, like unavoidably fall into the same mindset or trap that his father did, it becomes a little bit more apparent now. So let's also talk about his interpersonal relationships are a little bit off as well. And this is understandable in a way because he is, I don't want to say, well, he's definitely not exiled, but he's sort of an outcast within his own population due to his lineage. And you can see that in the way he talks with other people, particularly Angel at first.
Oh, yeah. Part of that is, it's a lot of it's my own experience, actually. I mean, when I was growing up in high school, I was the weird kid. So, I would often sit by myself. I had a very small number of friends, and I valued any social interaction I could get. So, but at the same time, I was socially inept. So whenever I did have social interactions, they would be very awkward and kind of forced and, not great. So that helped a lot with developing him and the way he interacted with people. But I think that as the story goes on and he goes from being this place that, he's an outcast to a place where, oh, these people actually, accept me, and these things that are a big deal back home aren't a big deal here, he kind of gets into a comfort zone and he gets better about interacting with them.
I did see that, yeah. It's almost as though when he starts socializing with the crew of the Forerunner, he gets like a social reboot. It's like when you're in middle school or high school and you go to summer camp and you're around a whole bunch of different people that you've never seen before. And it's like a social reboot, or even going to college.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. I love that.
All right, let's move on. There are a few moments in the novel which struck me as particularly enjoyable. And before introducing these, I'd like to know which parts of the novel you find you most enjoyed writing, or moments that you're particularly proud of.
Well, there's one scene that I love, and that's this. I actually started the entire book by writing this scene. When I was first planning things, I wasn't entirely sure I'd actually get it down on paper. But I came up with this scene, and I loved it so much. I told myself, if there is any chance I'm going to write this book, I need to write this scene down so I don't forget it. And that's the parts where they're in Caesarea, and there are these unjust laws that are forced. And rather than being a good soldier and following orders, he's like, no, I refuse. I will not do this. I don't care what the consequences are. I refuse to take part in this because it's wrong. Mm-hmm. And, the part when he's in the main hall and they're refusing to aid the Stonekin, and he sees this as a blatant violation of the oath he took. Mm-hmm. And that oath is to defend innocent people. Just, it's just very simple. You defend the innocent. It's simple. But yet this whole thing is making it political. It's like, oh no, they're not part of us, so we shouldn't help them. Or the treaty expired. We need to renegotiate. And he's like, no, screw that. We help innocent people. That's the end of it.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of room for interpretation there. And it seems like the bureaucracy is getting in the way. And we find out later why the bureaucracy is getting in the way.
Yeah. I enjoyed, developing that story. But, just making it clear about, his sense of right and wrong, and how he was willing to declare it in a room full of people, regardless of the consequences, and just, going off and willing to do the right thing, even though he was alone, even though he'd probably fail. it didn't matter because he cared so much about doing what was right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a situation where not being an experienced diplomat actually worked in his favor. It worked in everybody's favor. Yeah, I like that scene as well. It was pretty early on, I think. Yeah, it was fairly early on.
Oh yeah, it's like in the first 20 to 25% of the book, I think.
Mm-hmm. So there are a few that I really liked. And these are kind of specific, and I don't think any are really integral to the plot in a way that will reveal too much. They're what I thought were really cool ideas. So first, the scene is fairly early on where Lark and the crew of the Forerunner are gathering wood in armloads to power the spaceship.
Yeah.
And the mental image I got there was pretty awesome, which is, a bunch of people carrying logs of wood and tossing them in a wood burning stove and like, oh, that powers a spaceship. But, of course, that's not the case. And I thought it was a really interesting idea that you had there, which works in the idea of using natural resources in a very efficient way. Because the wood that they're using is nutrient rich and they use kelp and other organic material to power the spaceship, which intuitively doesn't seem as though it's possible. But if they're extracting the resources and extracting the nutrients in a highly efficient way, well, we just have transference of energy when you get right down to it.
Yeah. The concept was actually inspired by a game called Subnautica.
Oh, cool.
In that game, you get a bioreactor that you get hours upon hours of power by just, shoving some plant matter in there. And I love that concept. I mean, it made things convenient and it seemed like a good inspiration for a power source. But I mean, more than that, it's an optimistic fantasy. It feels so simple, so easy that just a large amount of power can be granted from just a relatively small source. Mm-hmm. And this is one of those things where I consulted my brother on, and I said, "Hey, do you think technology could ever advance to the point that we could use organic matter and in such an efficient way to actually get a large amount of power?" And he spent like 30 minutes explaining it, but the answer eventually was yes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that's a relief to know. Well, the very idea is not only optimistic, but I really like that idea. That was one of my favorite scenes. And the whole concept in general that you had there, I really liked. The next one, I think it's a little over halfway through, but I think it's Reynard, who's the tactical officer of the Forerunner. He's managing the helm. It's at one of those points where he's completely exhausted and he hears someone approaching the bridge. And from the cadence of the footsteps, he figures out it's Bastian, who's the scholar of the group, who's approaching. Mm-hmm. And without even turning around, Reynard says, "What do you need, Bastian?" And Bastian is surprised and impressed that Reynard figured this out, to which Reynard says, "Call it sixth sense." And there's maybe it's not so subtle, but you kind of work it in really well. There are two reasoning processes going on there because Reynard actually figures out who it was through a not so complex series of, deductive syllogisms. Okay, it can't be this person because this person's not on duty right now. The cadence of the footsteps is too long to be this person. So I'm going to deduce that it has to be Bastian. And there's a logical process that goes along with it. And then he just throws out, oh yeah, it was sixth sense. Which sixth sense gives intimations of magic, but the deductive process gives intimations of technology. And I thought that was a neat little contrast you drew there.
Oh, thank you. You can thank my wife for that one because I wanted a quote unquote non-protagonist scene, just with the crew without Lark and Angel to pad out that part of the book. And she came up with the clever idea of showing off Reynard's keen mind in that regard. I really liked showing little things here and there that made each character unique in a non-magical way that would still be awe-inducing to the reader. Like Lauren being able to operate on only a couple hours of sleep. I mean, that seems magical in itself. Sure. Akron's ability to command and adapt to an entirely alien world, alien threats, and he just handles it so well. Mm-hmm. And there are other things I actually have planned in future books to show off what other characters can do as well.
Cool. Yeah, it's small things like that give, I don't want to call them minor characters, but they give these characters who aren't the protagonists and antagonists, they give them a sense of personality that extends beyond just being placeholders for performing a certain role.
I'm glad it came off that way. Yeah. That's exactly what I was going for.
Cool. So the last one I really liked was regarding the Treekin and their bonded riders. At one point, I think it's either Maya or Reynard comments about their mounts, saying, "Those big rabbits, how effective are they in a fight?" And that brought to mind a rather amusing image of a battle bunny. But again, as he developed the idea, it totally made sense because I'm guessing you consulted your brother on this one as well, on the mechanical biology of a rabbit and how strong their hind legs are.
Oh yeah.
And if bred and large enough, they could probably kick over a tank, and they kick the heck out of some stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish I had some sort of deep or complex answer for this, but the truth is, I just think rabbits are extremely cute. My heart just gets all fuzzy for them. And when I was, planning the Treekin and who they are and what they do, I wanted a non-traditional animal companion because in so many books you see that they have wolves or elk or bears, and I wanted something completely different. And since this was an alien world, you could play with biology all you wanted. So as a random idea, I randomly came up with, what about giant rabbits? And the more I thought about it, the more I enjoyed it and the more it made sense.
Yeah, it does work. That's what's awesome about it. So when can we expect a sequel?
Well, I'm well into the first draft of the sequel, Oathbound. I'm not sure how long that's going to take to finish everything, but hopefully within a year or two. I'm also starting some scenes for the third book, and I've been working on outlines for the rest. I'm planning a 7-book series.
Holy cow.
Yeah, well, here's I know for a fact I've got 3. I'm going to do 3 for sure. Then I'll see how things go, and then I have an outline for 4 books after that. And then there was the standalone prequel I mentioned before. So I guess a total of 8 books.
Well, if you want my input, I want to read the prequel. But well, I'll be happy with the sequel for now.
Yeah, I'm planning on doing the prequel probably after the 3rd book, because there's going to be a rather large time jump between the 3rd and 4th books. So having the prequel as a in between, I think would work really well.
So let's move to the final question, one we both prepared for.
Yeah.
And this cracked me up as I was preparing for it as well. But the novel seems as though it would lend itself very well to more motion picture format. And this happened at the point where I started contemplating different actors in some of the more prominent roles. So I listed 6 of the more primary characters, and we each had a homework assignment to figure out what actor or actress would be best suited to each of these roles. So let's take turns in this one. Let's start with Angel. Who did you have playing Angel?
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with this group. They call themselves Viva La Dirtly. They have videos on YouTube. They do all this comedy stuff about D&D and World of Warcraft. And one of their regular actors is a woman named Britt Scott Clark. She's the right age. She's blonde, which works. And she's got a wonderful range. I've seen her play roles where she's this shy little introverted nerd, but at the same time, I've seen her play roles where she's this strong, forward-thinking, gamer that gives a middle finger to, male stereotypes in gaming. And it didn't even occur to me. My wife randomly suggested that. And I'm like, oh, that's perfect. Yes.
Yeah. Well, Angel wears several different faces. So that would fit. I chose Saoirse Ronan, she's the actress who was the protagonist in the movie Lady Bird.
Okay. And one moment to look that up.
Okay. I think how old did you envision Angel?
Mid-20s. I think I actually have a character profile that has her as 24 or 25 or something like that.
Okay. The age would fit here then.
Yeah.
But she's an Irish actress, and she did a fantastic job with Lady Bird.
Oh.
It was a coming of age movie. I think it was nominated for an Academy Award maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, I thought she would be quite good there.
Yeah, she definitely looks the part for sure.
All right, Idura. I'm going to go first on Idura. I was a little bit troubled when you said that Loki reminded you of Darkos, because I chose Tom Hiddleston as a good Idura, but you'd have to dye his hair blonde.
That still works. I mean, Tom Hiddleston's got range. I mean, through all the different places we've seen Loki, we've seen that the guy can be psychotic and unhinged, but yet methodical and careful, and he's really good about going between those 2 points. So that's still a really good choice, I think.
Yeah, and Loki's a wildly multidimensional character, and Adura is pretty straightforward, but I think Hiddleston just has that evil look, or has the potential to get that evil look in his face, and that evil look is what I pictured when I pictured Adura.
And he's handsome, so that helps, because Adura comes off as this handsome, unopposing guy.
Yeah, kind of a Ken doll, an evil Ken doll.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I went with Neil Newbon. He's the voice actor for Asterion in Baldur's Gate 3.
Oh, good call.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love him as a voice actor. The first time I saw him is when he voiced Heisenberg from Resident Evil 8. And I love both of those characters so much. And one thing they both have in common is that they're really good about being articulate and even-keeled and convincing and charismatic, but yet when push comes to shove, they're really good about coming off as evil and psychotic and, oh my God, my life is at risk here. And I've seen the guy's like real pictures. He's a handsome dude. I think he's a natural blonde, actually, so that helps too. So cool. I thought that was a decent choice.
Yeah, calm, collected, but very intimidating at the same time. Okay, let's move to Darkos. I have a backup choice on this one, just in case we chose the same actor. Who did you go with?
My primary choice is Hugo Weaving.
Okay, I did not choose Hugo Weaving.
I love Hugo Weaving. Every role I've seen him in, he's just breathtaking. He's so good at just the evil, calm, inexorable force. Seeing him, Smith, Elrond, V for Vendetta actually was a good one, because that's a morally complex hero. And somebody who could do that, I think, would be a great role for Darkos. And he's just got that look, he's got that calm. Yeah. So what was your choice?
My first choice was Alan Rickman.
Oh.
And I'm a little bit hesitant on that one. I think he was in Harry Potter, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. He played Snape.
Okay. And I haven't seen the movies, but his look, that reminded me of maybe a little bit more evil than in the Harry Potter.
I like that choice. I like it a lot.
Okay. So my backup was Ron Perlman, which would maybe be a little different. Yeah, a little different, but I'm like, it might work, but Ron Perlman might be a little bit too likable.
Maybe. I mean, like me, to me, he represents Hellboy. So
yeah,
it's hard to imagine him playing Darkos, but at the same time, he's got that older, grizzled kind of fatherly thing about him.
Yeah.
So that that could still work. My backup, and this is going to get kind of weird, but Liam Neeson.
Oh, okay.
Seemed like a good choice because, ever since I saw him as Ra's al Ghul in the Batman movies, I love how the man can play a villain.
Oh, okay. That is a good reference point.
He is so good about the way he talks and how convincing he can be, that makes you go, maybe the bad guy is right. And I love that concept about it.
And that would fit with Darkos and his history and personality, I think. Well, maybe not in this book, maybe in the next. We don't know yet.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to Lark. I have two choices for Lark as well. How old do you picture Lark? Mid-20s as well?
Yeah, about the same age angle. I couldn't come up with something. I mean, to be honest, I found one. I found a choice, but I'm not terribly happy with it. So I'm way more interested in what you came up with.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure. My first one, I don't have a first and a second here, but I chose possibly Henry Cavill, who likely is too old for the role.
Yeah, but I like him. He's not a bad choice, but I think he is a bit aged out. But I mean, when your options are limited, I mean, emotionally as an actor, I think he could definitely nail it.
Yeah, the way he played The Witcher, I think would fit very well with Lark's personality.
Definitely.
Yeah. My second choice was Tom Sturridge.
Tom Sturridge, not familiar with that one.
He plays the Sandman in the Netflix adaptation of Neil Gaiman's comic book.
Oh yeah, I've heard great things about that actually.
And very like almost unemotional, but very serious, but not in like an evil way. And the look he has there, maybe a little bit less goth, but he's got the black hair. He's skinny. He's well built. And
Yeah.
I thought that would work. I thought he would work well there.
Oh, I
And he's a
agree.
lot younger. He's in his 20s, I
Those
think.
choices seem much better than mine. I picked Kit Harington just because he's kind of
Oh, okay.
young looking. He's got dark hair. The
Mhm.
roles I've seen him in kind of work, but like I said, I wasn't happy with it.
Yeah. I could see him. He'd have to change his personality from what he did in Game of Thrones, but
Yeah,
a
definitely.
different character. That's what actors do. Okay. Akron. Who do you have for Akron? Oh, Lauren's first. Oh, let's just go with Akron. I have him written down first.
Okay, Akron. I went with Keith David. I don't know if you're familiar with the guy. Did you ever see Armageddon?
No, I haven't.
Okay, he's this older guy. He's a military general. He's very official, very commanding, but he makes wisecracks here and there that make you think, oh, maybe he can not take things as seriously. But there's a voiceover role I saw him in recently that was very much not a serious role, and it really made me change how the guy approaches acting. And I was thinking, you know what, he could do it definitely.
Yeah, for this one, my choice of actors for this is what, shall we say, inspired me to come up with this question. But I had Russell Crowe for
Russell
Akron.
Crowe.
Maybe.
Oh no, I like it. I like it. I like
I was looking
it.
at his physique and his facial expressions and the way he looks. That's the way I pictured Akron. Now, Russell Crowe might be a bit too mean or surly for that role, in which case I thought George Clooney might also be good, but George Clooney has such a presence that he might just steal the show.
I know. I mean, like, you see him in anything, immediately he is, and it's hard to separate him from his role. Mm-hmm. But I like Russell Crowe. I mean, I like him as an actor. I've liked him in the roles I've seen, so that would definitely work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, who did you have here?
For
Akron.
Oh, it was.
No, you said it already. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. So Lauren,
I went with Mary Elizabeth Winstead. Okay. Have you ever seen Scott Pilgrim versus the World?
I haven't.
Oh, she plays the main female character. She's really good at this badass. I'll kick ass at a moment's notice if necessary. And she's got the fire, the passion, the intensity, and I think that'd be a great choice. How about you?
I had Genevieve O'Reilly, who plays Mon Mothma in the reboot of the Star Wars series on Disney. And I think it was more the look she has. And she's a very calm, cool, collected politician there, but she does not put up with crap from anybody.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Reading about her, yeah.
Yeah, maybe this would be a much more aggressive character for her, but I think she would pull it off pretty well.
Oh, that's a good choice. I like your choices a lot. They seem really well thought out.
I got lucky maybe on a couple of them, and I think I missed the mark on a couple more. But
well, that's okay. I know I missed the mark on a couple, so you don't have to worry about that.
So let's move to maybe something outside the book. You're a self-published author. How has this worked out? What's been the process for you? I know it's extremely difficult right now for self-published authors to get their work known, to find a publicist, to do anything that might get their book noticed. What have you done? What are the problems that you've encountered? What are the good things that you've encountered about it?
It's tricky. I mean, when I went into it, there's so many things about it. I had no idea. I mean, making the choice between self-publishing and traditional publishing, there's so much information to make that choice. I mean, traditional publishing can be safer in a lot of ways because a lot of the editing, the marketing is out of your hands and it's a lot less work. But at the same time, you also have to work hard to send out your manuscript to dozens, if not hundreds of sources, trying to find an agent, a publisher. And it's hard to find one that will work. I've seen so many stories of people saying, I get dozens of rejection letters every day. And even if they get accepted, you have to accept that they're probably going to want to change a lot of your book because they're going to go with what's marketable or what they think will work. And I didn't want to compromise that. I wanted to sell, or more specifically, I wanted to get my book out there the way I wanted. I wanted to fail on my own or succeed on my own, if the case may be. But being a self-publisher, one big example is formatting. I mean, there's so much that you have to do to format your book so that it meets the credentials of whatever distributor you're going to go with. I mean, I went with Amazon, and you have to make sure that the indentations with the wording, the spacing, the sides of the book, the font size.
Super interesting technical stuff that I imagine drove you crazy.
Oh, it really did. Every time I thought I might be done, there were two more things. I'm like, oh, hey, turns out I still have to do this. And I even had someone helping me. I had someone helping me that knew the process, but they just kept coming back saying, oh, we still need to do this. We still need to do that. So I can't imagine trying to do this without, someone that knew what they were doing. Like the editing process alone. I mean, that's the big cost is editing. I mean, getting a professional editor for a book this size is like, it's like $1,000 if you want someone who knows what they're doing. But I just didn't have that money. So I spent a considerable number of days, weeks, even months editing my book in one form or another. I think it turned out really well given that.
Yeah, it looks as though it's well edited. I mean, there are no spelling errors or weirdness with punctuation that I've seen in other self-published books.
I love hearing that. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's obvious that you put in a lot of time. You didn't have to have an editor right there. But yeah, I've read horror stories about people who have a very good novel, but a publisher wouldn't publish it. Like, let's say someone wrote a space opera, but the publisher they're dealing with already published 3 space operas that year.
Yeah.
And they don't want to saturate the market with something else within the same genre. And it's very unfortunate that the merit of a book has much less impact on its success and the way it spreads than we might hope.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, marketing your book is also a big important thing that a lot of people don't realize that you have to do, because some people think that, hey, I published my book, it's good, it'll sell, right? I mean, it's good, it must sell. But no. Nobody in the world knows that you've published a book. So you have to get out there. You have to get on social media. You have to talk about it. You have to promote it. You have to do so without being overly annoying. Otherwise, people will not want to read it. So there's that balance. And I've gotten on Facebook, on Reddit. I've actually been doing a lot on Threads. If any of your listeners want to try being a writer, Threads, the Facebook alternative to Twitter, has an amazing supportive community for writers.
I've discovered that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so nice.
Well, for this podcast, this is an offshoot of another podcast I do. And just on a whim, I posted on my Threads account in that podcast, hey, would anyone be interested in being are there any self-published and indie authors out there? I want to interview you. I'm thinking about making a new podcast and I'm just gauging interest. And you were the first one to email me about it. That's why you're the first one on this podcast.
Nice.
But that thread just exploded. And within something like 3 days, I had 50 emails, which is crazy. Yeah, I'm booked until October right now.
Jeez, wow. I'm honored that I get to be the first one then. Nice. Thank you. Jeez.
Hey, well, you are the OG, Charles. The OG, episode 1. So congratulations on that. Charles, where can people find you on social media? We know you can find you on Threads. What's your handle there?
Well, give me just a moment. I've got all this written down somewhere. So it's threads.net at archblade.c.a.house. It's Archblade with my author handle. And I also, I've got Facebook. I mean, basically, if you search Legend of the Defiler, you can find my author's page on there. I think, on Reddit, I've got an account there that I engage a lot with my book. It's Archblade 7777. And those are really the only ones that matter. I mean, I've got an Instagram and a TikTok, but they're I'm almost 40, so I barely even know how to do anything with those. So,
hey man, I'm 51 and I barely know what's going on.
Oh, there you go.
Too,
yeah,
so you're in good company here. Yeah, I got a few years on you. But all right. So if you send me all those links, I'll put them in the show description. So anyone who listens to this will be able to visit them.
I will definitely do that.
Fantastic. Charles, it's been wonderful talking to you. I really enjoyed reading your book. I didn't get a chance to say that I devoured it in probably a couple days.
I was surprised. When I told you, yeah, I'd like you to read my book. Next thing I know, you've got all this stuff, and I was thinking, wow, this guy reads super fast.
Well, I move quickly on stuff like this, and I
see
wanted to
that.
get this out. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I did a second read where I was remembering specific parts of it. But yeah, I highly recommend it. It was a lot of fun. There's a lot going on there. And once again, thanks for being on. And I wish you all the success in getting your book out there and all the success as an author.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure, and we'll talk soon.
You betcha.